you know what we're going to talk about, the trans issues. So on trans issues, as an example, over 60% of Americans agree. Of course, they should have the same constitutional rights, same rights to housing, employment, rules against discrimination, etc. Does 1/3 of the country disagree? Yeah. Sad day for them. 2/3 of the country agrees trans people should be protected. I'm 100% on board for that, right? And if you're a right winger and you go, no, man, they're weird, they're different, they're blah, 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 and I'm going to hate them. Well, good luck to you, brother. I'm not going to hate them, and I'm going to protect them, okay? But so that didn't work for them. So they went digging. So then they go, okay, we should ban trans people from the military.
Did you read the New York Times article I told you to read on this the last time we had this conversation?
I'm not sure I did.
About how, okay, so...
they went digging.
Yeah, so what you're describing is what I was explaining to you, that the Christian groups, the right-wing Christian nationalist groups, in the aftermath of the failed initiative to do a trans bathroom bill in North Carolina, at a time when Donald Trump was pro-trans, openly stating he was pro-trans, openly criticizing the North Carolina legislation, saying, leave it as it is, nobody cares. Caitlyn Jenner can piss in whichever bathroom she wants to piss in, as long as she's pissing in Trump Tower. When all this stuff was happening, there was definitely a different attitude overall. I think part of that was because, just like you also recognize, most Americans, like, they just think trans people are being discriminated against and unjustly. And the other reason was because it just seemed like cruel and unusual for no particular reason. So what these Christian family groups did was go back to the drawing board and, hire the likes of, maybe Frank Luntz didn't personally involve himself in this one, but like people like Frank Luntz that would go and focus group and test different messages.
Yep.
And they arrived at two key points that were resilient. Americans don't necessarily care about trans issues all that much, but they do care about meritocracy. And what is the one place where there's true meritocracy in the eyes of many Americans? Now, there's, still not perfect meritocracy, but sports. Sports is the one area where if you dominate, if you're good, you're going to dominate. If you're dominant, then you're going to get elevated, right? So they packaged anti-trans sentiment with sports, and specifically children's sports, right? And that is where we arrive at, 60% of the country, or even larger percentages than that, don't think trans women should be participating in sports with cis women, specifically trans girls, competing in athletic endeavors with cis girls.
Yeah. So that's exactly my point, Haas. And when they laid that trap, first of all, the right wing should acknowledge that was identity politics being played by the right wing. The right wing did the polls. They did the studies. They were looking for something that the American people would hate about the left, about trans people, about LGBTQ people. When you go looking and searching and digging on identity, don't tell me you're not doing identity politics.
No, this is
doing.
identity politics, and the right does it all the time. Now, listen, here's the thing, okay? You understand this to be a distraction. Like, you recognize that it's a distraction, which is why I don't think either of us are saying that this should be the pivotal. This should play a pivotal role in the top of the line messaging of the Democratic Party, which is that, like, no, trans women have to compete with cis women. I don't think anyone is making that argument at all.
No.
But I think we should, it would serve us both well to openly recognize, and I think you do as well, that this hyper focusing on, trans athletes at the high school level all the way to the collegiate level is a distraction that most Americans might have an opinion on, but don't necessarily care about. It's not a major driver of turnout. It's not something that people go out and vote for.
I don't agree.
No. Okay. Well, we can have that argument in a second. I will explain it to you why I don't think it's a real issue. Part of the reason why is that it's just simply not a real issue because do you know the number of trans athletes nationally?
So I know that
under the collegiate level.
No, it's microscopic.
That's
40.
Why. The number is 40.
Yeah, and so like 20 states, 20 red states passed a law against transgender girls participating in high school sports, and they couldn't name one transgender girl in their state that participated in high school sports.
Yes.
So that's exactly my point. We start with agreement.
Even Spencer Cox vetoed the bill in Utah originally, and he actually wrote like a pretty compelling argument as to why he was vetoing it. And governors like Andy Bashar have actually won by higher margins after openly defending trans people in the past in a state like Kentucky, for example.
So look, we start with a point of agreement, which is that the right wing uses a wedge issue to drive a wedge between us. They go looking for it, and they do it based on identity politics.
Okay.
So we totally agree on that. We totally agree that it's a microscopic issue that affects almost no one in the country. Okay. So when we don't have paid family leave, we don't have health care for everyone.
I don't even think that's
meant
true.
To distract us.
I don't even
disagree.
It does
on
impact
how to
people.
react to it.
It does actually impact a lot of cis women. There's more cis women than there are trans women, and there are a lot of young girls that this could technically impact, because now you have bills like the one in Ohio, the penis inspection bills, like the one that they have in Ohio, where like one of the parents from the opposing team could be like, "That's a trans girl, actually," and then they have to literally go and traumatize this like young girl who in many instances is not statistically it is highly unlikely that person is trans to begin with.
So
and,
look,
and
again,
it ends up harming cis women even more than it ends up harming trans women.
So look, I said this exact same point on trigonometry, and their audience hated it. But this is the reality. The reason I make a distinction between high school and professional sports is because in high school, what you're saying is, like Ohio, if I really want to institute this, even though it affects almost no trans or cis girls, if in the world in Ohio as it is, but if I go to implement it, now I got to check everybody's genitals, and there's got to be a genital checker, right? And let me guess. Tons of Republican older men are going to volunteer to check the genitals of our high school kids. And I hate it. I don't want it. It's like a groomer pervert factory. And they're going to probably put Jim Jordan in charge of it. No. Okay. But when you get to the professional level, you get to the Olympic level, you guys make a giant mistake. You fall right into their trap. And you go, oh, yeah, sure, they should be able to compete. When the overwhelming majority of the American people do not agree with you, you should let the Olympics and the professional sports decide it on their own. It is not a constitutional right. They have no so-called right to participate in the WNBA. I don't have a right to participate in the NBA. So, number one, I don't agree when you go to those extremes. And number two, does it affect elections? Well, we had an overwhelming answer to that in the Trump-Harris contest. Because Donald Trump ran the anti-trans ad, which was not about hating trans people, although of course it was perceived as such by a lot of people. And so, what it was saying, hey, you guys are giving free surgery to undocumented immigrants who are detainees who are trans. It's too much. It's too, and I agree, it is too much. 98% of Americans agree it is too much, right? So instead of saying, oh no, that you guys are right, that's too much. And of course, sports leagues, that's fine. And of course, no, we're not going to pay for any surgery for a dude who just crossed the border a second ago, right? Instead, you guys go, no, let's fight. Oh, for God's sake. And you dig in. And now we're on a losing ground for no reason at all.
Can you tell me who on the Democratic Party's campaign was actually saying, like, no, we have to issue bottom surgery for undocumented migrants, outside of Kamala Harris saying that in an ACLU questionnaire in 2019 when faced with the question, what will you do for trans people? She just gave that answer, which was a bad answer to give regardless. But was there like a hyper focus from the Democratic Party's campaign that I'm missing?
So Trump starts running the ad, and it instantly jumps to the most effective ad according to Trump's internal numbers and according to Kamala Harris's internal numbers. So at that point,
that's also not true. David Plouffe literally said on the Pod Save America autopsy that they engaged in that the ad actually wasn't all that impactfed at all.
Yeah,
I don't believe it.
Say that. I know it's not true because Future Forward, the biggest PAC that Kamala Harris has said that the Charlemagne the God version of that moved the national polls by not the national polls, but for people who viewed it, it moved the numbers by 2.7 points nationally.
Okay.
That is gigantic. And they said it was the most effective ad Trump had. That's why he then doubled down and quadrupled down and wound up spending 20% of his entire ad budget on that ad.
I think
because both sides thought it was the single most effective ad.
I think that's literally the reason why Kamala Harris was able to actually catch up to Donald Trump on not only the economy because of their hyper focus on the trans. But here's where
that helped Kamala Harris?
No, I don't. I think that this kind of hyper focus on a marginalized group is not moving people to go out and vote in any meaningful capacity for some of the reasons that you also mentioned, but also because most people don't know who the trans people are. They've never met a trans person. They don't give a shit. They just care about the economy. And when you're hyper focusing on just like trans people and like dominating trans people or some shit, even if it's something that they agree with, they're like, after a certain point, there is outrage fatigue. And I think on the trans issue, we like consultants and people who are hyper focused on the media care far more about the effectiveness of ads like that than the actual Americans that went out and voted. And you saw
Except
this reality.
We lost, they won.
No, I know, but okay. So
I mean, like, it's so in the real world, they won, we lost. In the
that's why
in
you
the
have to
world
look at,
of consultants where they look at polling.
That's why you have
they
to
won,
look.
we lost.
That's why you have to look at the broader campaign and what Americans were concerned with and why they voted in the ways that they did. And I think here's where you and I agree on.
So your position is, even though both sides overwhelmingly say that ad was the most effective ad and it moved people and it cost Kamala Harris tons and tons of votes, you disagree.
Yes. And the reason why I disagree with it is because, well, I don't completely disagree with it. And I'll explain to you why. And I think you and I are going to be in agreement with this. I think that the only way that that ad is even remotely sticky when, or even remotely effective, when I still question the legitimacy of how effective the ad was, because there's plenty of examples of people actually defending trans people and then winning by resounding numbers all across the country.
It depends on what issue, though, Haas.
It's because the Democrats they stand for nothing. There is nothing that unites the base of support for the Democratic Party. They are this weird big tent, third way neoliberal party that is constantly pointing to institutional norms and defending this notion of civility. If that is your overarching campaign strategy, then yes, if you stand for nothing, you will, people can turn around and tell others what you actually stand for. They can reframe what you actually stand for and say this is the type of stuff that they care about actually. And therein lies the problem. And I think you and I will agree on this. If it was like a Bernie Sanders style candidacy, if Kamala Harris was like, I want Medicare for all, that Americans are suffering. I want to fix the housing crisis by implementing a federal jobs program backed like mass housing boom that will actually fix the housing markets in all these big cities and all across the country by building a shit ton of houses. No public-private partnership, none of that. No opportunity economy language whatsoever. We're gonna just build, baby, build. Okay, if those are some of the key markers that you're focusing on, this does two things. Okay, this does two things. Number one, Republicans are reactionary, so now they have something that they had to fight against. And if they don't have anything to fight against, they're going to find new wedge issues to make everybody pay attention to, no matter how silly or stupid, right? So now they have to fight against that policy and present why that policy is bad. Now they have to sit there and lie about why giving healthcare to every American is actually going to be devastating because they're backed by their corporate donors. So that's a major issue with the way that the Democratic Party operates in general. And I think you agree with me on this, right? If you give him something to fight for, if you give him something to fight against, they're not going to find new ways that find new things that they can just like draw a wedge on. So that's number one.
Okay. Number
two. Okay. The second thing is when you don't have this broad, very obvious policy that you like earnestly are fighting for, that you have been able to communicate to like the majority of the population, like this is my North Star. This this is the key defining issue of the Democratic Party this election cycle. Okay, all of a sudden, when you cave and capitulate, the second point I was going to make is when you cave and capitulate the right wing framing on these issues, the only thing you end up doing is basically admitting that the Republicans are right. And the Democrats have done this on immigration. The Democrats have done this on policing. The Democrats have allowed the Republicans to dominate the space over and over and over again. And they've done it with trans issues as well, or they're doing it now with trans issues as well. Just call it out for what it is. It's a simple distraction. This is not going to put food on your table. This is the way that the Republican Party gets away with being in the pocket of billionaires openly by saying this is the only thing that the Democrats care about. Trans people are your neighbors. They're not your landlord. They're not your boss, and they're not the reason why healthcare is so costly. Okay, they're a tiny group of people in this country that just want to live their same lives. They literally have the same exact class interests as you. They literally also have to pay rent at the end of the day. They also still are harmed by the same job opportunities that people have. They also are worried about not being able to own a home or retire at a reasonable age. The idea that these people are the reasons as to why you're experiencing economic anxieties is silly. Don't ever have this conversation. That's what I say. And that's how I deal with it as someone who is obviously somewhat radical in my pro-trans message overall, because
so look,
it's silly. It's a nonsensical position that you even recognize as nonsense.
So let me start with the agreement and move to the disagreement. So the agreement is super important here because you're right. And this ad is, in a sense, the perfect symbol of, in my experience, you only agree with half of this, but the merger of what is wrong with the Democratic Party's corporate wing and the radical left wing. You smush them together. We'll get to labels in a minute. Okay, so you smush them together and you have this ad, and this ad helped Trump win and Kamala Harris lose. Why are you smushing them together? For the exact reason that you explained, Hus. Because if they were like Bernie Sanders and they were economic populists, Bernie can say, why are we talking about that issue? We should be doing higher minimum wage and we should be doing universal health care, et cetera. And then now we're having a real conversation about things that affect people's lives. And Kamala Harris can't do that because she's too busy pleasing the donor class, right?
Tony West. Shouts out to my man, Tony West.
And who cost us the election more, that ad or Tony West? Not close. Tony West. Okay, so Tony West, who's the Uber executive, that's her, brother-in-law, told her, "Oh, you know what? You're too tough on corporations. Instead, you should give them a big bear hug. Go out there and put out that 90 corporate CEOs signed a letter saying you're awesome, and that you'll work for corporations and do everything that they want. Bring in Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney pulled a 13%. Liz Cheney's one of the most unpopular people, progressive." Data for Progress did a poll that showed the more she campaigned with Liz Cheney, the more she lost support. She lost enthusiasm. It was a super dumb idea, and that cost us more than this ad did. This whole idea of, oh my God, I love big business, and I'll do everything big business tells me. Look at Mark Cuban. He's on every cable channel telling you that I will do whatever the business interests want. It's the worst idea in the world, especially when you're running against Donald Trump, and Donald Trump's going, hey, here's a billionaire, Elon Musk. I'm just going to give the government to him. And here's another billionaire, Miriam Adelson, and I'm going to give foreign policy to her. And here's Tim Mellon, weirdo guy who inherited all of his money, and douchebag who wants tax cuts because he's just rich and earned nothing in his life. And I'm going to give him tax cuts for the rich, right? But they never make that case because they're corporate douchebags. Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, all of Democratic leadership. And so these guys are never going to win another general election. The American people hate them. They should hate them, okay? And so what the right wing doesn't understand is both the populist left and what they call the woke left, I call radical left or whatever, we'll figure out the label in a minute. But in this case, you're on the right side. You say the corporate interests, the donors, right? So, and the populist right agrees with that. So that's actually an interesting point that we should come back to, a point of agreement we should come back to. But the part where we disagree, Haas, is you say, well, if they're digging in on a wedge issue, ignore it. But Kamala Harris literally did that. They had a giant debate about whether to address it or not.
No.
They even pulled ads
You're
where they
misunderstanding
addressed it.
You're misunderstanding
and they decided, oh, let's not address it.
You're
And it was a
wrong.
mistake.
They literally also, like, they did this with immigration especially. Like, they were like, we're not going to ignore it. We're just going to get ahead of it. And what they did with immigration, they're going to do with trans issues next election cycle. And it's the same principle over and over again. It makes you look like a hypocrite, and it makes you look like the Republicans were right all along. And the only thing it does is prime your base into conceding and agreeing with the Republican framing on an issue. If
So
there
what
was
do you
any
do instead? What I say is I delineate. So when you say, hey, Andy Bashir runs against it, but which issue? So if you're talking about constitutional rights, you fight for trans rights 100%. You're talking about military, you fight 100%. I'd fight on bathrooms. I'd fight on high school. But I draw the line on sports. I draw professional sports. I draw the line on giving free surgeries.
That's the thing.
Then you can defend your position and get back to
there's
where the great majority of American people agree with you.
You want to know why there's no reason to draw any of these lines? Because Kamala Harris did actually bring this up, which I thought was like, especially because like she didn't have a clear or consistent position on this at all. It was like, it was left out there in the dark, but like Trump did the same thing as well for undocumented migrants.
Say that. I
it's
know.
It's just like it's a thing that nobody gives a shit about until people are primed into caring about it. That's my point. It's been happening for a very long time for prisoners that want to get this component of healthcare, and nobody technically gives a shit about it. It's already like a incredibly tiny, minuscule, marginal percentage. So it doesn't matter. Like it ultimately doesn't matter. I'm saying if the Democrats had
but
something
it did matter.
If Democrats had, but it didn't, and I'll get to that in a second. If Democrats had something that they were fighting for, nobody would give a shit about this. That's the point.
Yeah, but that
you brought up Bernie Sanders and you said, oh, healthcare, universal healthcare. Bernie Sanders has also said trans rights are human rights. Like, you know what I mean? It's not like,
but that's the difference between 2016 and 2020.
It's not like Bernie Sanders. It's not like Bernie Sanders himself is saying like, yeah, trans people, we got to cut them out of this bargain.
Trans people, you guys are just making that up.
No,
but Haas, when you frame it
first
that
of all,
way, you get all these crazy
Republicans
people
are
online.
saying that. Republicans are saying that.
No, I know, but we're not saying that.
No,
you get all these crazy people online who are like, "Oh my God, if you don't agree to free surgeries for every trans person on planet Earth, you're a Nazi." Well, you know those people exist, and those people, that is the radical left, and they are stupid, and they do cost us elections.
No, you're hyper focusing, and I've had this conversation privately with you many times over. You are hyper focusing on people that are in your replies on Twitter, and because
so you agree with
all
me,
you
that radical left
because
is bullshit,
all you interact
stupid dumbasses. Do you agree?
There are a million people that are both in your replies that have also gotten mad at me as well, time and time again, on specific issues, maybe ones that even pertain to trans rights. Okay, it literally doesn't matter. People get very passionate, understanding. I'm very understanding.
Shocking agreement. I agree. There's 13 douchebags online. That's what I said from day one.
I know, but why the would you ever hyper focus on
but
people like
because
that?
Look, no. So you might be doing the right thing. Hold on.
You're doing the Bill Maher thing. You're
bullshit,
demanding that there needs to be a sister soldier. You're doing the sister soldier moment.
No.
That's it. No, you're trying to.
So the minute we said the most reasonable things on earth, which you now agree with, apparently, then what happened? It wasn't just the 13 douchebags online. And by the way, everybody said, no, those 13 douchebags represent all the left. You're not on the left anymore because the 13 douchebags control the left. And then what happened next? Then Majority Report jumped in, and Lance from the Serfs, and all the other little dirtbags jumped in, and they were like, "No, Cenk and Anna are turning right. The 13 douchebags are right. We need to protect every trans person should get free surgery.
We got.
Even in China, even though we have nothing to do with China, we hate them. They're Nazis.
You got to. Okay.
I mean, I'm 100% right. Every dirtbag show did it.
You got to calm
Every
down.
dirtbag show did it. Tell me I'm wrong.
This is reframing an issue that is now we've moved away from the electoral consequences of a trans ad to your own personal anger and frustration that you have with left-wing media online. We are
so do you agree left-wing media online? Those guys that I listed are full of shit.
I have
and in a tiny stupid minority.
I have disagreements with everyone in this space, but there's a reason why seemingly I don't catch the same amount of strays that you do, because I don't hyper
I
focus.
can tell you why.
I don't hyper focus. What do you think it is?
They think you're hot, young. I don't mean attractive. God bless on that. Okay. I'm also obviously hot. I mean, as in they think, oh, the young people watch Hasan. He's cool. And you give the thing of like, oh, no, trans people are right on everything, right? You don't come out and make the distinctions that Anna and I made. Okay. So they think, oh, no, he's good. He's extreme as we are.
I think
he's woke left. Yay, extremeness.
I think the reason, first of all, you're
okay. By the way, majority report and all of you guys, you better attack him. He apparently agrees with me. Okay. You better attack him. You're not going to attack him, are you?
You're hyper personalizing this into like criticisms that you've
comes
received.
And punches you in the face 12 times, and you go, whoa! Why are you hyper personalizing it?
Because
just because I called you a Nazi, now it's personal to
because
you.
myself, you, majority report,
but I never changed my policy. All of
this is inconsequential in the grand scheme of things. And whenever there's like drama, for example, I've been getting attacked mercilessly by my former podcast co-host that has been actively trying to deplatform me for the past 2 months because he thinks that, or he's claiming that I am creating a space that is anti-Semitic. The way I've dealt with that, for the most part, is by just actively ignoring it leading up to the election, because I was like, this is some silly nonsense. And in the aftermath, I covered some of the broader points, and I moved on. If you extend the conflict that way, instead of trying to find a reasonable middle ground, and even show humility even show humility instead of saying I'm right, there's never going to be any sort of real
Why am
solidarity.
I going to show humility to you, a bunch of idiots who are wrong?
Because I
like what does humility mean? Like, oh, maybe you're right about your dumb opinion that's going to cost us this election. Okay. Maybe you're right about your dumb opinion that gets the majority of the country to hate us when our economic positions are overwhelmingly popular. Maybe you making us intensely unpopular when we should be focusing on universal health care, higher wages, paid family leave. But you idiots hate policy. All you want is identity politics. And you think that drives ratings, and you want me to show humility to those morons? None. Zero.